Dori, it's a pleasure meeting you here, and I look forward to our conversation and getting to know more about you and about personal branding.
Thank you, Yaroslav. It's great to meet you as well.
Thank you. Dori, I understand that in April there will be a fascinating program about personal branding that you are going to lead here in Skolkovo in Moscow. Can you tell a little bit about this program?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So in April, I'm going to be leading a 3-day workshop on personal branding. And part of why I'm so excited about it is that fundamentally when we talk about personal branding, what we're really talking about is your professional reputation. And so whether you're an entrepreneur who needs to build trust with clients and prospective clients, or if you work inside of an organization, you are going to be facing situations where you need to make sure that people truly understand who you are and what you're capable of. If they're looking at a number of people for that promotion or for that new opportunity that you want, ideally you want to do everything possible to ensure that your merits are seen and recognized. And so the personal branding program is going to help people learn how to be strategic in an authentic way about how to do that so that they can make the biggest impact possible.
Right. And this program, three-day program, would that be for a particular organization, or who can attend?
It's an open enrollment program, so actually anyone who is interested in the program should absolutely contact Skolkovo because it may well be right for them. We're interested in casting a wide net and having a diverse group of participants so we can all learn from each other.
Right. Talking about personal branding in general, I understand that it's been quite popular and it's been quite everywhere in the recent years. How did this start?
Well, the movement in personal branding really became popular about 20 years ago. There was a cover story in Fast Company magazine, which is a popular business magazine in the US, by Tom Peters, the management thinker.
Sure.
And it was called The Brand Called You. And it really raised awareness about the idea that in a rapidly changing economy where people often change companies or they change careers, we need to be much more aware of what our reputation is and how we're perceived. In the past, if you worked at the same job and with the same people for years and years, of course, over time, they would come to understand, are you talented or not? How good are you at your job? But these days, for almost all of us, we're working with large groups of new people. You may be working with international teams or people all across Russia, all across the world, whether they're clients or colleagues. And especially if you're changing companies or changing positions, there are new groups of people who are being exposed to you. And as a result, if all you do is just keep your head down and work hard, it may take a long time, a very long time, if ever, for them to really clue in to what you're fully capable of. But if we exert just a little bit of thought, a little bit of forethought and strategy, you're much more likely to make sure that other people really get it and that you will be able to be tapped for the kinds of opportunities that are right for you and help lead your career in the direction you want. And one thing, Yaroslav, that I'm very curious about, obviously you're a leader at Spencer Stuart, which is a premier executive recruiting company. You come into contact with this every day. I'm curious about your thoughts when it comes to the candidates that you're talking to and placing for the best positions. How do you think of the role of personal brand in terms of the work that you do?
Right. Thanks for the question, Dori. I actually think, I have my personal thinking about success in professional and not only professional field. And I think it's there are three pillars for success. One is your expertise. You have to know more than anybody else in your field. You have to have this expertise and knowledge that would be, an ultra premium knowledge. Then you need to have your network, because your network helps you to do more than anybody else. And then you have to build your personal brand, because you need, as you mentioned, how do people perceive you? It's quite important. If we take corporate brands like Mercedes, every generation lives with the desire to possess a brand like Mercedes, and they work very hard to put in our minds and brains, this desire. Every day is a hard work of Mercedes company to create this, desire in the society. I want to have a car like Mercedes, and so I think there is a parallel. If we take a personal brand and personal branding, I think it's kind of the same duty. We have to invest and work hard, invest into developing personal brand and work hard. If we look at people like Elon Musk or Richard Branson or some hired executives like Herman Gref here in Russia or Lee Iacocca, the famous CEO of Chrysler, they are brands. They are like, celebrities, business celebrities. And we know, probably some people know about them because of this, popularity around these people, around these business executives and business owners. A big question for me to you probably, Dori, do you think they, people like Richard Branson or Elon Musk, do you think they kind of from day one they realized that they have to invest into personal branding and they made particular steps to develop it?
I think it's a really interesting question. And from my perspective, Yaroslav, I think that all of us need to be more cognizant of the fact that we all currently have a personal brand.
Right.
And I think for a lot of people, they think, oh, well, when I get more senior or when I am really trying to make a push for being tapped for a promotion, that's when I'll think about my personal brand. But of course, we all currently have one. We all have a reputation. People think something about you. And so all along, we've been cultivating a personal brand. The key question is what they think about you what you hope they would think about you? And so I think that we can take a few steps to really make sure that those things are in alignment. Richard Branson and Elon Musk have done a great job in terms of sending a very consistent message about who they are. I mean, almost anyone, if you were to ask, describe their brand, they would say, oh, well, they're bold, they're adventurous, they're strategic, those kinds of adjectives. And I think that for any professional, we can start out by saying, if people were to describe us in only 3 words, what do we wish they would say? And when you determine that list of how you would like to be known, it actually helps you work backwards and develop a plan. Because you say, if I want to be seen as bold and adventurous and strategic, well, what are the activities that I could do that would cause someone to view me that way? And it begins to be almost an action list or an agenda for you in terms of your professional development. I would love to hear from you, Yaroslav, how you think about personal branding inside your company and also outside. Are there differences in terms of how you think about that or how you would go about cultivating your brand in those spheres?
Right. So yes, there are differences and similarities. So I think both internal branding and outside branding are important. And look, when you are at a large organization, when there are more than 2 people in the organization, then I think, building the right perception, the perception you'd like to have about you is critical. And if the organization is very large, like thousands of people, then you understand that you have interdependency. You have other people who can influence your success or who can be tolerant about your success. So obviously you want to have supporters in the organization. And people love doing business with people they like, they trust, and they just have personal chemistry. And so I think internally it's important, we can take such simple things like, getting extra budgets, getting promotion, getting more people into your team, getting, a permission to hire extra resources. So it's important. Externally, same things. You want your customers, suppliers, understand you and probably, give you more preferences than they do to your competitors. So I think these two things are very, very critical.
That's great. And I think it makes a lot of sense. In your experience working
Right.
with so many professionals and so many candidates for very senior positions, I'm curious, are there common mistakes that people are making? If you could give
Yeah.
advice to somebody who's
Yeah,
a
look,
senior
Dori,
leader.
it's a great question, and I think the major mistake, and I see it, it actually doesn't really matter what level the person is at. So it can be a CEO, it can be a senior executive, like C-suite executive. Most people, like 95% of corporate executives, they think that personal branding is not important. And this is the mistake. This is what people think that, what I do and how I do, it's basically define my success. But it's just part of the equation. The other part of the equation is how people perceive what you do and how you do, and you are in charge of creating this perception. So I know many CEOs who can deliver the results, who have good performances, but they keep quiet. They think that the results will talk for themselves. But it's not true, because there are many people who would not like your success, who would not like your results, and they would start, reinterpreting these results against you. And so I think this is, I would say 5% of the people doing it right, like they have it as a strategic priority, as a top priority, how I can create my perception, how I'd like people to think about me. And the 95%, they don't do anything specific, they just go with the flow. And I think anywhere we can take our, physical shape, our mental shape, our relationship, if we just leave it and don't control and don't take charge, we should not blame anybody else but ourselves why things happens that we would not like to expect.
I think that's a very important point. I'm curious, in the lectures that I give about personal branding,
Right.
I will sometimes hear from people who are concerned that if they think about personal branding, if they focus on it at all, that they will be perceived by other people as bragging about themselves.
Yeah.
How would you respond to that?
Yeah, look, I think, in early you said authentic way, and this is the key. If we do something that contradicts our personality, people would immediately react. They would not like it, because they would think this is, this is superficial. This is, this is not you. So it requires a lot of energy, brainstorm, creativity, how to do it in the authentic way, as you said. But I don't know what you think about how to create, how to build your personal brand in the right way. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I really agree. I think that the concern that many people have that they will be perceived as too arrogant or thinking too highly
Right.
of themselves is in many ways misplaced, because when we talk about personal branding, it is not about stating how wonderful you are. It's not saying, oh, I did this, I did this, I did that, because no one wants to even listen to that. That wouldn't even be successful if that were the way to do it. Instead, this is much more about two things. It's about self-knowledge in the first place. It's about really understanding yourself deeply enough to know what you want to contribute and what your strengths are so that you can add that value. And second, it's about being strategic enough to understand how to convey that. Oftentimes not even through words, but through your deeds, through your actions. Right. Because your personal brand is so much more than just what you say about yourself. It's about the totality of the impression that you leave people with. So it's making sure that your actions are in alignment with how you'd like to be seen. It's everything from who you associate with to the professional leadership opportunities you engage in. It's your online persona, it's how you dress, it's really everything about who you are.
Right, right. And Dori, we talked a little bit about some business celebrities like Richard Branson or Elon Musk. And I think, when people start talking about should I pay attention to personal branding, and if those people are senior enough, they can use examples of people like Henry Ford or a senior executive who is popular and famous for his track record in business. Do you think people like Henry Ford pay attention at all to his personal brand?
Well, I think part of what confuses people is that personal brand is a relatively modern term, as we were saying. It was 20 years old, and so people think, oh, this must be a modern concept. People in the past clearly didn't worry about personal brand. They worried about much more serious and meaningful things.
That's right.
The personal brand must be frivolous. But of course, if we understand that personal brand is nothing more and nothing less than a synonym for your reputation, well, all of a sudden it changes the entire discourse, because your reputation is something that matters in a profound way. Almost anybody would recognize that. And if you can imagine for one moment that someone of Henry Ford's stature or any business leader didn't care about their reputation, it's almost unthinkable. Of course, for any leader that wants to make an impact, they know that if they want to get clients, they need to have a reputation as someone who is capable and trustworthy. And if they want to inspire the loyalty of the people they manage, they can't do it just by fiat, just by dictating. They have to have their employees also trust them and know that it's moving in the right direction. All of that is critical to the idea of having a strong reputation. So I think it's much more important than people might realize on the surface.
And when we talk about reputation, for example, if there is a person who understands that I have the reputation I don't like, do you see an opportunity for such a person to change the perception, to improve the reputation, to optimize his or her personal brand?
Yes, absolutely. And this is actually the topic of my first book, which has been translated into Russian. The English title is called Reinventing You, I believe in Russia. It's known as personal rebranding. But fundamentally, for many of us, we are in a position at some point in our careers where what we are known for now is not what we would wish to be known for. And it could be because we want to make a change. Maybe we'd like to change jobs or industries or get promoted. But it could also be just that we feel that somehow our abilities have been misunderstood. That maybe there's a boss that doesn't really understand that we are a lot better than he or she thinks we are. And so how do you change and turn around that reputation? It's not always easy or self-evident, but absolutely it's possible. And having a willingness to engage with your personal brand is critical here. I think that there's a few steps that we need to be thinking about. The first is the importance of consistency, because it often takes many more iterations than we might imagine for our new brand to really sink in for people. You can't just say, oh, I'm changing to do this now, because people will forget, they're not really paying close attention, so you need over time to continue to do it. And that means showcasing it in a lot of different ways. For instance, on social media, maybe you used to be in one field, you're moving to another. Continuing to post thoughtful articles about the new field is critical, so that you're reinforcing the message and so that people understand you're serious about this. This isn't a whim or a fad. That's a piece of it. And I think the other one that fits in really tightly is the importance of sharing expertise. A lot of times people might think, oh, well, I worry about personal branding, that people might think I'm promoting myself too hard or I'm being selfish. But actually, if you come at personal branding from the position of trying to be helpful, of trying to share knowledge that you think is genuinely useful or genuinely interesting, then it's very hard for anyone to attack you or be angry about that. And so in the example of someone who's trying to change their brand, let's say move into a different profession or field or company, if you are continuing to offer value in different ways, just being helpful, talking to people, giving speeches or writing articles, however it's done, if you are continually doing that and showing to people so they can see, oh, well, actually, I thought he did this, but he seems to know a lot about this new subject, then that helps it sink in over time so that people understand this is your new identity and you actually have something legitimate to contribute here.
Right. And Dori, so continuing on this, so for example, I've been in the board recruitment and CEO recruitment business for the last 17 years. And so if today, after our conversation, I immediately decide to change the industry and, for example, move to the business education sector. So, I'd like to be a senior executive at Skolkovo, but people don't know about me, as an expert in the education sector. So, how would my first steps look like, and how long would it take me to change the perception?
I think it's a great question. So the first steps, let's imagine that you're aiming toward this new role in business education. I would say, of course, there's the interpersonal, where you start to talk to your friends, let them know of your interest, and try to work in your network to position yourself. That helps get the ground ready so that people are saying, oh, okay, I guess Yaroslav is moving in this direction. But then also publicly, let's say you do land a position in business education and you've shifted over. This is the place certainly where social media can do a lot of the work for you. You don't have to be spending huge amounts of time, but if you make an effort twice a week to post a picture of you lecturing at Skolkovo, or, okay, oh, I'm talking with students at Skolkovo, you're reminding people of that and they begin to think of you in that way. Perhaps you come across interesting articles in a professional publication about business education or the future of business education. You could share those online because they might be interesting for other people. It's ways to reinforce it. And then a very important thing, small and subtle but important, and a lot of people miss this opportunity. If you are at a conference or a networking event, almost invariably, people are going to say, oh, so good to see you, Yaroslav. What are you up to? What are you doing lately?
Right.
And most people don't have a good answer. They haven't prepared anything. They say, oh, the same thing. They waste the opportunity. But this is the place where someone is asking you now. And so you can say, oh, I'm so excited. I just started teaching at Skolkovo. And you have your pitch that you give, and it helps it be reinforced. Any of us can do this. We just make sure that we're talking about the thing that we're moving toward rather than the thing that we're moving away from.
Right. So consistency is critical here.
Absolutely.
And so, to get the first signs of the outcome, how long do you think it would take me to change the perception? If I do everything's right, I mentioned who I am, what I'm doing, I work with social media, present myself in the right way. So would that be a month, 6 months, 5 years?
Yes. So I think that when it comes to changing your brand, and let's define this as whenever Yaroslav's name comes up, people don't think of him in executive recruiting anymore. They think, oh, of course, Yaroslav, the business school leader. Those are changes that I would estimate you will begin within 3 to 6 months to start to see a shift in how people are talking about you. Now, it's probably not a complete shift. It may be, oh, isn't Yaroslav doing something different now? Oh, didn't he have a thing with Skolkovo? They'll start to try to remember. If we are going to estimate how long it will take before the first thing that they think about is the new position, I would guess, of course it varies, but I would guess 2 to 3 years.
Right. And what do you think is the most difficult for a person to start doing when he or she decides to change the perception and improve the personal brand?
I think in many ways the hardest part when it comes to changing your personal brand is your own self-perception. It can be a challenge for people sometimes to shift into a new area, especially if they haven't necessarily been thinking about it for a long time or wanting to do it for a long time. There's a woman that I profiled in my book, Reinventing You, named Roxanne Crete, and she for many years was a teacher, and she ended up getting a job as the head of a charity related to education. And she had been doing this for several years, and she was at a cocktail party once with her husband, and she introduced herself. And the person said, well, what do you do? And she said, well, I'm a teacher. And the woman said, oh, well, where do you teach? And Roxanne said, well, actually, I'm not in a classroom. I run this education charity. And her husband later said to her, why are you saying you're a teacher? You haven't been a teacher for years. This doesn't make any sense. And she realized, oh, wait, I need to update my own self-perception. Sometimes even that can lag. And so we're in some ways expecting the rest of the world to come along, but we need to understand that sometimes our internal thought process has to take a while too. At the point where you might be ready for other people to accept you in your new identity, it's possible that you've been thinking about this already for multiple years. So we need to be gentle with ourselves and perhaps understanding of others, that it's a process that takes time and iteration. Now, something that I'm curious about, Yaroslav, is you mentioned, of course, you have a lot of experience in the field of executive recruiting. You've been doing it nearly 2 decades. What are the changes that you've seen over time? What are the things that are different today as compared to 17 years ago?
Look, if we take Russia, there is a drastic difference. First of all, let's say 15, 20 years ago, the executive market was at the infant stage. People basically didn't really understand what a professional executive was about. And people really didn't understand, what was performance or your track record in managing the organization and getting the organization to another level. So it was just, an unknown field for Russian corporate world. Now it's different. The capacity of the executive market is much bigger now. So you can compare. You can, basically build a matrix of successful executives and understand at what stage you need this executive or that executive. If you need to transform your business, then that would be this group of senior executives. If you need to expand your business or launch a new product or enter to a new market, that would be this group of people. And these people are known not only for their experience or their professional skills, they're also known because they are known. And they, I know some executives, they really invest into building this brand, this personal brand. And I think, it's part of capitalization on your brand. You can ask for more. And this is new. This is what we couldn't see and we didn't see, let's say, 15 years ago or 20 years ago.
That's fascinating. So when you're looking to place someone at the highest levels, what are the things that you look for? What makes a candidate stand out to you?
Yeah. Look, I actually, it can be a little bit, it can sound a little bit pragmatic, and but I think, in my thinking, in my concept, it's true. We are all surrounded by brands. What we wear, what we drive, what we eat, where we go to. So it's all about brands. We are sitting here in the Moscow School of Management, Skolkovo. It's a brand. We used particular car brands when we got here. Then we will use airlines. It's all about brands. So in companies, people are also brands. When we build a board of directors, it's all about brands. People are not interested. The shareholders and the chairman of the organization are not interested in just people. They're not interested in just a skill set or experience. They're interested in a brand. If you look at the, let's say, S&P 100 companies and at the composition of their boards, you would see a group of brands. A former CEO of Boeing, a former CEO of AT&T, a former CEO of Chrysler, a former CEO of Coca-Cola. It's all about brands. Yes, of course, there are fundamentals around those brands, experience, track record, success, etc. But you can achieve probably success when you run a small shoe company, but you would not be considered to a first-year corporate board when you run a shoe company. So, and I think this kind of understanding that branding is important just give senior executives, give board members more upsides, because they understand that this should be on their to-do list, and they should do it in an authentic way, but systematic and consistent.
I agree with you completely, Yaroslav. I think that for many people at this point, building a personal brand is an afterthought. And if people really want to be successful in their careers, whether they're at the senior levels currently or aspiring to the senior levels, it's something that needs to be integrated into their conception of how they do everything.
Right.
It's fundamentally about how you're living your life, and is it congruent? Are other people really understanding and getting the full message of who you are and what you can do and what you can contribute?
I think there is a perception that some people start placing too much emphasis on personal branding when they don't have this expertise and knowledge, and they claim they are top experts, world gurus, and people feel it, and people think, okay, it's just blah blah, nothing else, no ground. And so this would be my first question: how do you think people should differentiate where there is only marketing and branding, and when there is a top expert who just helps to other people to understand that this person is available to help them? So what kind of advice you can give to people to help them to differentiate these two groups?
Such an important point. So one thing that I like to suggest to the people that I'm coaching and consulting around personal brand is that you should never say, I am the expert. That is not for you to say. That's not for you to decide.
Right.
What is far more important is, do other people think that you're an expert? And so I think it's very legitimate in your bio or in your CV to list if a publication has said you're an expert, or if you have received an award, or if you have done certain things. By all means, say that you have accomplished them if they are facts. But a distinction that I like to suggest is that people should think in nouns and not in adjectives. And what I mean by that is that if you are stating factually, you did this, you won this award, this publication said this about you, these are verifiable facts. Anyone can check to see that it's true. And if the people trust the authority that has given you the award, or if they trust the publication that has said you are an expert, then fantastic. But if you say, I'm an expert, and the person who is claiming that I'm an expert is me, then it's not very helpful to anyone. It's not helpful to the potential customers, and oftentimes it makes you look a little desperate. So I think that third-party validation is really critical here.
Right. And the other question is, social media plays a very critical role in our life, just everyday life. And when we talk about personal branding, do you feel that sometimes social media manage us, not we manage social media?
I love that, because I hear from a lot of people that social media is all-consuming. And so oftentimes many professionals feel that they really only have two choices. They either need to spend all their time doing social media if they're going to engage, or they stay off of it and they say, well, I can't spend all my time doing it, so I'm just not going to do it at all. And of course, neither is a good solution. It is frivolous to spend all of your time on social media. Clearly, there are more important things to do, but it also is careless to not engage on social media because the conversation is happening. And do you really want it to happen without you? So what I advise people is to think about a rational middle path that they can engage in. I very strongly believe that if you are a professional, can do social media perfectly well and perfectly effectively in 30 to 60 minutes a week. This does not have to be something you're spending hours and hours on. But should you have a profile on some of the most common social sites? Yes, I think it's useful because it's a way that people want to learn about you, they want to engage in some ways. I can't tell you how many times I have received invitations to give lectures, to have paid consulting engagements, things that are actually very valuable inquiries, and they've come in not through my website, but through social media, because people are engaging there. So I think that it's important to be aware of social media and to be conversant in it. I certainly don't think we should allow it to take over our lives.
Right. Thank you. And one question, Dori. I understand that the starting point for this journey, personal branding journey, starts with an answer to yourself. What's your final destination? What's your strategic objective? And so a professional like you, how can you start an individual to help with this part? Because I think it's one of the most difficult ones.
Yes, there are many people who are certainly not sure of where they would ultimately like their career to go. They may have rough ideas, but with any specificity, it gets complicated. And that is a normal and natural thing to experience, for sure. What I like to suggest to people is that fundamentally, it's about creating more options for yourself moving forward. In most cases, you may not have a precise idea of what you want to do, and in fact, the circumstances may change. We all know that there are new trends and new industries that are opening up every day. There's positions, whether it's related to artificial intelligence or new trends or things like that we can't even conceptualize today that may be very promising in 5 or 10 years. And so what I like to advise people is find a path that seems interesting to you. Even if it is not ultimately what you want to do, if it's at least in that general direction, if you're moving toward it, it gives you options around it. It helps move you closer. And if later on you decide to adjust, that is perfectly fine. You can take stock of your professional life every year or so and say, are my hypotheses that I was operating on before still correct? If yes, I'll keep moving forward. If circumstances have changed, then maybe I'll adjust a little bit. But with each new skill you develop or new set of contacts that you cultivate, you ultimately have more options in the vicinity of where you'd like to go.
Right.
And I'm curious for you, Yaroslav, how do you advise people along those lines? Because I would imagine that being an expert in the world of executive search, that you often are dealing with people who are facing these questions about where they really want to go.
Yeah, I think, look, for me, it's the question, what's my ultimate goal, career goal, life goal. I think, setting the goals is the most critical in our life. We can take any part of our life, physical activities, intellectual development, financial development, relationship, anywhere. Setting a goal is the most critical thing. Relationship, networking. We can start networking here. We can go outside and start getting to know people. But what's the point? And this question, what's the point? I think it's the most important question. And so, to my surprise, being in this business for so many years, I see people reaching the top roles. They don't actually know how did they get there and what would be a next step for them. And it's like 95%. 95% have no clue what to do next. And they just think, maybe I need to change a job. Why? I don't know. maybe for a raise, maybe for a more interesting job, and what would be next? I don't know. And so when we don't understand what would be our ultimate goal, these intermediate steps, they just don't bring any importance in these moves, in these next career steps. So I think defining the ultimate goal, defining your strategic objective in your professional development and in any other aspects of our lives is the fundamental first step.
Yes, I agree. And I understand, Yaroslav, that in addition to your work with Spencer Stuart, you also have developed your own independent program for executives to come together. I'm curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I call it Ginta Club. And if you come across a concept of Benjamin Franklin, he had, I think it was called Junta Club. So it was the concept of getting together with people who think like you and who have similar interests. And it's interesting that Benjamin Franklin's initiative created fire brigades in the US or public libraries. That group of people, they basically brainstormed those ideas. And so I was so inspired with this idea, and I decided in 2016, I decided to do something similar. And now, 3 years later, I see that it's working. So we have a group, I don't know, of about 100 people, 120 people. We get together roughly once a month. And these are all the people I know. They're from my network. They're all, either business owners or senior executives, CEOs, and board members. And I arrange a discussion, an interview like this with somebody who achieved a lot in his or her field. It can be an athlete, or it can be a business executive, it can be chairman, it can be a politician. And so we have this interview, we have a networking opportunity, and it's kind of a cross-fertilization exercise where I have 3 words, like a motto for my Ginta Club. It's insights, networking, and idea exchange. So these 3 words, they represent the value of the club.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. What a cool initiative.
Thank you. And Dori, one question I have is about cultural differences and country differences. I'm quite sure that, people here in Russia, they would be a little bit skeptical and sometimes think that, no, it would not work here in this country. And I think people in Spain or in Germany or in Poland or in the US or in Venezuela would react more or less the same. Like, we have our cultural differences, we don't do like this, etc., etc. What would be your advice, and would you see such a challenge working around the world?
Yes, so you're absolutely right. Certainly different cultures have very different views of personal branding, and I actually have lectured about this around the world for business schools in Europe and South America. I've spent time teaching in Kazakhstan and South Africa, so I've seen a lot of the cross-section of reactions. And one of the things, and I'm glad you brought this up, that's very important to note is that even though it's true, I am American, and even though statistically, they've done studies about perceptions, it is true that personal branding is viewed most favorably in the United States. It's something that Americans are perhaps more comfortable with than other cultures, although certainly not everyone. I think that the most important thing to emphasize is that in no way is this an effort to say, oh, everyone should do this the way that Americans do it. I believe that the concept of personal branding actually can and should be translated to all cultures, because it's not about the specific tactics. The tactics that are going to be effective in personal branding are certainly going to vary by culture, by country. In the US, we use different social platforms. We don't have VKontakte or things like that to begin with. But also they may even change by industry. What is the same, however, very much so, is the underpinning principles of personal branding. And that is, number one, I believe that regardless of your country or your culture, it is important to understand yourself well enough to know where you are going and what you want to be able to contribute. Number two, it's important to understand how other people view you so that you have a realistic sense of where you stand. Number three, it is very useful to be able to be strategic in thinking through how is my message being heard by others. And if they're not quite getting what I want to do, how can I make small changes to make it more likely that other people will really understand that and my potential can be tapped? This is not about making huge changes to your personality or trying to sell people on something or trying to be anything that you're not. It's really about alignment. It's about saying, okay, if there were a way that I could make it more likely that other people would really understand the difference that I could make, if I could make it somehow more likely that people would see my potential and I would be able to do the thing that I most want to do, why wouldn't you do that?
Right. And Dori, going back to the program, 3-day program in Skolkovo in April, what do you think people have to know before the program and what should they expect after the program?
Yes, thank you, Yaroslav. So people coming into the program for personal branding don't have to have any special research or knowledge. Fundamentally, it's about a willingness to engage. What I would most like to see in the participants are people who are interested in really thoughtfully looking at themselves and their brand and being willing to do the work in the session to think about how they are coming across and to think about, again, small things that they could do to create an action plan for success. It is fundamentally, as I see it, an investment in your own career to be able to do this. If you're an entrepreneur, having a strong personal brand makes it more likely that you'll be able to attract media attention and that clients will come to you. If you are working inside of an organization as an executive, having a strong personal brand makes it more likely that you will win promotions, that you will win raises, that you will be able to attract the kind of mentors and supporters in your career because they know about you and they respect you and they say, okay, let me help. Those are all things that are extremely valuable. And so I think coming in, a willingness to dive into that is very important. What they will leave with is an increased understanding of their brand and a clear sense of what they need to do moving forward, an action plan to be able to really ensure that other people are seeing and hearing them more clearly so that they can get moving on making the kind of progress that they want in their professional lives.
Right. Dorian, we live in the century of fast pace, and people usually, when I talk to people, they usually ask about life hacks. So what would be your life hacks in personal branding?
Yes, so a life hack for personal branding, I would say, is a very simple, quick thing that I would recommend is that everyone who is who's watching this, hopefully, should have a Google alert set for their own name. Now, people perhaps are familiar with a Google alert. If you are not, it is simply an email that you get every day from Google that tells you if your name has been mentioned on the internet. And to set it up, it's free. You just type the words Google alert into Google and it will tell you how to do it. It takes 10 seconds. But having this is very valuable because if you have been mentioned somewhere on the internet, it could be a news article, it could be somebody's blog, whatever it is, first of all, if somebody is talking about you, you want to be aware of it just because other people might be seeing it. So it's useful for you to have that information. But if they've said something positive, you can thank the person. That's a nice thing to do. If it happens to be inaccurate information, well, certainly you would want to take action to correct it quickly. So that's something that in 10 seconds or less you can do that I think would make a positive difference in terms of your personal brand. And I know that, Yaroslav, our conversational time together is running short, but a final question that I have for you is as you think about the future of executive search and of people who really want to position themselves for the highest echelons of positions in Russia and internationally, I'm curious about trends that you see moving forward in the next 5 or so years. What is going to be most important in the future that people may not be fully thinking about today?
Yeah. Look, actually, I think there are 3 skills that are universal and that are in a high demand in any country, any continent, in any century. So those 3 skills would be visionary, because all organizations, all nations are led by a visionary individual. And visionary skill is one of the most critical skills. If you look at, I don't know, Alexander the Great or Elon Musk or Henry Ford, they are all visionaries, or Edison, they're all visionary individuals. So this skill is unique and critical, and I would think that this is something, if a person would like to see himself or herself as a CEO, I think this is one of the skills we need to develop. The other skill is leadership, because for this vision, you need to convince people to follow you, to believe that future that they cannot feel and sense it exists in the future, and they trust you and they follow you. And the third skill would be change management, because we live in the era of distractions and in the era of volatile times. And so your ability to adapt and to change your way of thinking and keep going, keep moving forward is the third critical skill. And so I think, the environment can change, but those 3 skills, we can, from the Stone Age to digital era, the environment has changed many times. But those 3 skills would remain the same critical, the same strategic, the same important. And I think, these are the 3 skills I would place emphasis on, even if you are at a very early stage of your career, but you have ambitions to become a CEO or the chairman or a leader of a large organization.
That's so helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great to have the chance to speak with you.
It's great, and I so much enjoyed our conversation. Thank you, Dori. Thank you.
Сколково.